while fear is the emotion that we feel in the presence of a threat, anxiety is a sense of the anticipated danger, the trouble, or threat. So a young lady in 8th grade is feeling anxious because she might not have the right backpack. She might not be wearing the right shoes. She might not think she's cool. And this is not just she, but boys feel the same way. So that's part of, excuse me, that's part of what the anxiety is all about with some of these children. Um, there was a lot of the studies about anxiety had really focused on teenagers, but there was a study of 4 and 5-year-olds done in a kindergarten classroom, with the result being that they felt that even these kids get anxious because we expect a lot of our kids. We really do. And they really feel the pressure. So school, although we try to make it as wonderful as it is, it can really be a pressure cooker. I remember, I like every once in a while to throw in some personal vignettes to talk about it, but and I love teachers. I really do. I think they have such an unbelievably difficult job, and 99% of these teachers do a great job. But lots of times they have to respond to what the school wants. So when I went to a parent-teacher conference for my 4-year-old son, and my wife and I were told that they were having a lot of problems with my son because he didn't want to sit in circle time. Now he was 4 and he didn't want to sit in circle time. And so I said, well, could you tell me a little bit more about it? And their response to me was, well, all he wants to do is play. Well, as a play therapist, that really didn't surprise me at all, that all my 4-year-old son wanted to do was play. And as we began to talk about it, the teachers were describing how by the time he got out of kindergarten, it was required of him to know the entire ABC and for him to know the entire alphabet, the Hebrew alphabet. So now he's 4, so he's in pre-nursery and he has nursery to go and he has kindergarten to go, okay? So I said to the teacher, I said, okay, hear what you're saying. Can he spell his Hebrew name? And they said, oh yeah, not a problem. I said, well, if he can spell his Hebrew name and he knows the first 10 letters of the alphabet, then he knows already 14 of the 22 letters. So what are we worried about? Okay. And recently I had a conversation with this teacher who started off the conversation by telling me, I just want to tell you that I've changed. I don't feel this way anymore. So, we send our kids to school, and to give you an example, this school that our children went to, they were they were an academic school. The JCC where we send some of our children are very different, okay? They are very involved. They really want their kids to know how to be social human beings. So one year, one of my children had been at the JCC, and when he went to the school that we send our kids to, all of the kids who were in the JCC were put in one classroom because the administration felt that they were behind academically. Okay, they were like miles ahead socially. And what happened is that by November, they had to mix the classes together because the other kids were so socially behind. So this study really made me understand how even a 4 and a 5-year-old can feel anxious when they're in their pre-nursery and in their nursery and even in their kindergarten, because we expect a lot of them. Now, children who are anxious can be anxious for any number of reasons. Sometimes kids come to a new school, okay? Sometimes kids move into a new house. Lots of times there are many children who sometimes experience different kinds of traumatic experiences, a house fire, a grandparent dying. And I'm always, as a therapist, I'm always telling parents that if you have something that's going to affect your child, and that your son or your daughter is going to be anxious about this, what you need to do is you need to let the teachers know, because teachers, although we would like them to be prophets, they aren't prophets. Okay, we would love for them to know what's going on with every single kid in their classroom, but that doesn't work. I had a friend of mine who was a high school teacher, and came to me about 3 weeks after high school started and said, I think there's somebody in my class who's depressed. And I said, well, have you spoken to the parents? And he spoke to the parents, he spoke to the school. November time, when they finally had a parents teachers conference, the parents finally said, yeah, he's depressed, he's on medication. And this teacher was like, well, 3 months have gone by now, and I really could have helped your son. Why didn't you tell me? So sometimes parents don't want to let teachers know these things because they're embarrassed. They feel, as a parent, I should be able to take care of this for my kid. So these children then go to school with a great deal of anxiety for any number of reasons. And teachers need to know about that, because every teacher that I know has been to seminars regarding anxiety in school and how to help kids when their children are anxious. Okay. We have no idea, as teachers, as people who are trying to help kids, we don't know what's going on in families as far as family arguments, family disputes. We don't know what goes on behind those closed doors. All we see is, as a therapist, I see when the kid comes into my office, and as a teacher, they only see what the child is presenting with. Okay, so one of the things that's really, really, really important is that we, as parents, as caregivers, as grandparents, when we sense some anxiety in any of our children or our grandchildren, what we have to do is we have to tell them that we're seeing that there's something going on. Talking to kids is really so instrumental, because kids, and if I'm all on, I don't know what your positions are, but any child who doesn't know what's going on and can't express himself, they have the most vivid imaginations. I cannot tell you how many parents I've spoken to over the years where there's something going on in the family. I don't want to tell the kid. I don't want to tell my son. I don't want to tell my daughter. And you talk to the kid, and they have they think the worst. Okay, it could really be nothing, but they absolutely think the worst. Kids have unbelievable imaginations. So there are lots of parents that I've spoken to over the years who have this idea that I have to be my child's best friend. That's what I have to be. And it's very, very, very important for parents to understand that they need to be their child's parent. And if a parent notices something in their child, it might be a difficult conversation, maybe not with a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old, but definitely with a 10, 11, 12 and upwards. That can be a difficult conversation. But if you don't have it, then then children feel, oh, my parent doesn't care about it. Like, I'm acting out in school, and I'm sure my teacher's been calling, but nobody's saying anything to me about it. Okay, so it's so important that we get our children to talk to us about what their anxieties and what their worries are, because the truth is, they may be something very, very, very minimal. I don't like who I'm sitting next to in school. Okay, I know an organization who they give out school supplies. Okay, and this year they decided not to give out backpacks because the backpacks that the kids really want are bloody expensive. And one kid doesn't want to go to school without the backpack with the fancy name. Hello. Hello. So they didn't give out backpacks. Okay. So it could be something so minor as a child just feeling that I'm not meeting up to the standards of what the kid sitting next to me is. So that can bring up a great deal of anxiety in these kids. Okay. And we need to reassure our children that when we feel that they're anxious, that we understand them. Okay. there's nothing wrong with being able to say to your child, there are some times when I get anxious, or if you don't want to use the word anxious or anxiety, that's perfectly fine. But to be able to say, I worry sometimes also. Sometimes I have worries, and I talk to your father, I talk to my mother, I talk to your grandparents, just to let them know that there is something normal about people having some worries. Okay. And that's really important. Now, especially with really young kids, you might get some physical things like kids who are soiling themselves in school, can't make it to the bathroom. Okay. You get kids who are in fourth, fifth, sixth grade, and I've seen this, kids who have a physical reaction when they get out of the car or before getting on the bus. They get so nervous before they get on the bus or before they get out of a car and carpool. So it's really important for us as parents to be able to say, I noticed this morning when you were getting on the bus that you were really, really not wanting to get on the bus. Can we talk about this? Help me understand, because kids love to talk. I'm sorry about that. Kids love to talk. So it's really, really, really wonderful when we're losing people. Oh, I only have Marcia on the call right now. Oh, but Margaret's back.
There you go.
Okay, right. Right. So one of the things that kids look for when we bring up our worries or we bring up their worries is they really want us to help them find solutions. And solutions sometimes can be so simple. Okay. If and for the example with the backpack, okay, if a kid's feeling anxious about not being cool because they have the wrong backpack, parents need to sit down and say, this is the backpack you have. Okay. And this is what you're going to use. And I understand that the kid next to you has the backpack with the fancy schmancy label on it, but that's not the kind of a backpack that we bought for you. And then it opens up a conversation about this, this kind of anxiety. Okay. So let's say, okay. So basically kids feel anxious for any number of things. And it's really important for us as parents to be able to recognize it. Okay. They're not, we also have to teach our children to recognize anxiety. Now, that's not necessarily going to happen with the really young kids, but kids who are in fourth, fifth, and sixth grade and up, you want them to be able to recognize when they're feeling anxious. Like, to be able to talk to them like, okay, you're sitting in class, what's going on? Okay. And you can say to them, I've read up on this, and sometimes your stomach is churning, and sometimes your heart can be beating really fast, and sometimes you could feel yourself sweating. Do any of those kind of things happen? Okay. And then lots of kids go, yeah, how'd you know about that? Okay, they sort of look at you like, how did you know that? So it's really important for us as caregivers to be able to say, yeah, this is what I know. Okay. And there's some really, and if your kid has anxiety, if you know a child that has anxiety, it's so important for the teachers to know, because there are so many things teachers can do. Okay. Teachers can find a good place for a child to sit. Teachers can say, to a parent, okay, your child has anxiety. When your child has anxiety, it's okay for him to get up and walk out of the classroom for 5 minutes. Okay. I had a client a while ago, and he didn't like to sit. What do you say in Yiddish? They say he had spilkus. Okay. He couldn't sit in class. He just couldn't do it. And I spoke to his parents, and his parents said he comes home from school and he's no problem. He does his homework, but he does his homework standing at the dining room table. So I was involved with the school, and I said to the teacher, would it be okay if this young person stood in the back of the room and did their work standing up? And the teacher was like, I don't care if he stands on his head. As long as he hands in his work to me, that's perfectly fine. He's not disturbing anybody. And the kid was perfectly fine. Okay. But he was so anxious sitting in class, just knowing that he just did a lot of moving around, and it really was disturbing to him and to the people around him and to the teacher. And the teacher was like, oh, thank God you talked to me about this, because let him stand in the back of the room. Yay, we just solved a fantastic problem. So lots of times it's a really, really, really simple thing. Now, yeah. There are some things that we can change. Okay. You're going to move to a new house. A grandparent is ill, or a grandparent passes away, or there's some kind of an emergency at home. We really can't change those kind of things. Okay. But as parents, we can talk to our kids and we can say to them, I am going to loop your teacher in on this. No, I don't want anybody to know. I don't want anybody to know. That's the reaction most kids come up with. And you can say to them, but you know what? Your teacher spends a lot of time with you. I mean, if you think about it, teachers spend an inordinate amount of time with their kids. And it's sort of like when parents say to me, oh, Mike, you see my kid once a week in therapy and nothing's changing. And I will say to them that it's a slow process, but try to remember that you have your child in your care for 6 days and 23 hours. And I have this child in my office for an hour a week. So it's the same thing with the teachers. Lots of times teachers see things that we as parents don't necessarily see. Because most parents are really busy. Most parents have, both parents are working. Lots of families have, a bunch of kids. And so lots of times teachers are able to say, this is what I'm noticing with your kid. And it's really, really, really important for us as parents to be able to listen to what the teachers are saying. Now, for little kids, distractions are great. Okay. Like if a kid is nervous about going to kindergarten, okay, one of the things that I've suggested to parents is play a game on the way to school. Okay. Or if your kid gets on a bus, play a game with the kid in the morning. Okay. Make it more pleasurable. So, it's the night before, put out their clothes, have them be part and parcel of putting out their clothes. Just don't say, here, I want you to wear this. It's sort of like one of my kids, I don't know, I'm sure everybody on this call remembers the Magic School Bus. Okay. So he had a pair of shorts and one leg was purple and one leg was blue. And he comes down one morning and he's got his shorts on and he's wearing a purple sock and a blue sock. Makes perfect sense to me. Okay. My feeling was he's dressed and he's got his shoes on and he's ready to go to school. Let him go. Okay. And the teacher saw this. Okay. And later on, many years later, when I talked to this teacher about it, she was like, well, I just thought he was, a little anxious coming to the class. So I just gave him all this positive reinforcement about it. And it was not a big deal. And I said to her, it wasn't a big deal for us either. So sometimes distractions are really, really, really good ways to do that. We can also really try some simple relaxation techniques. Okay. Very simple ones like slow breathing. Okay. Hello again. How are you? Slow breathing. Okay. Everybody can take 3 deep breaths. Okay. That's not a problem. Even, no matter how little kids that I've seen who are 6, 5, 6, 7 years old, they can do deep breathing. It's really not a problem. Okay. So we also have to, as parents, try to maintain a level of composure for ourselves. Okay. Lots of times, and I've seen this over the years, when a kid is anxious, parents get anxious. And it's the other way around as well. Lots of times, when a parent is anxious, the kid picks up on the parent's anxiety. So one of the things we have to do is we have to know for ourselves that if we have some anxiety about a kid going to school or a kid with a particular teacher, we need to be able to work that out for ourselves and figure out what kind of way that we're gonna work on ourselves so our kids don't pick up on it. Because no matter, and I'm sure everybody on this call who has kids, you all know that kids pick up on everything. Okay, absolutely. They pick it up, oh, my wife and I are having an argument. So we go into the bedroom and we have an argument in the bedroom. My kids don't know anything about it. Yeah, that kind of thing doesn't happen. Okay, because kids have these special antenna. Okay, even though we as parents can't see them, they have this special antenna and they pick up on everything. Okay, so we don't want to be 100% honest with our kids, only because there are things that kids don't need to have information about. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about different kinds of anxiety that we see in kids. Okay, so the first one is a pretty simple one. There are kids who have medical issues. Okay, kids who might have diabetes. There are children who have who unfortunately have cancer. So there is anxiety that goes on about that just because you have a medical problem. And so that's a pretty simple one to have to think about. Okay. There's something that we call a generalized anxiety disorder. And that's when kids like worry a lot about some activity or an event, like kids who get really, really, really worked up before a soccer game or before a baseball game or, before going off to a sleepover. Okay. And we as their caregivers, we really want to pay attention to the fact that this might be a little bit over the line. Okay. If we're noticing it, okay, okay, we're parents. And what do we want to do? We want our kids to have a great time. So we sometimes have a tendency to minimize a little bit, but telling them that you're seeing it is really, really, really important. Okay. Kids who have a generalized anxiety disorder, and that's really not something that gets diagnosed very much with little kids. Okay. But the worry really is just out of proportion. Okay. And sometimes it's just up to us as parents to say, okay, let's look at this. Let's sit down for a second and look at what's going on. Okay. You have your soccer game coming up. What is making you so nervous about the soccer game? Oh, we had a soccer game last week and I missed one of the kicks and blah, blah, blah. Okay. So you missed one of the kicks and you just talk it through with your child. Okay. That makes such a difference to them, because what you're also not doing is you're not being judgmental. And that's one of the things that we really work on, is trying to get parents not to be judgmental. Oh, no, you missed that kid. Now, don't do that. Okay. With little kids, we have a separation anxiety disorder. Okay. And that's pretty early on. That's usually with the nursery, the kindergarten, maybe even the first grade kids. These are the kids that just become so nervous when their parent leaves. Okay. And it's difficult for the teachers, it's difficult for the kid, it's difficult for the parent. I mean, I'm sure anybody who's ever gone to drop a kid off at school has seen what happens when a kid doesn't want their parent to leave. It's never a pretty sight. Okay, parent doesn't want to leave, kid doesn't want to leave, kid is holding on to dad's pants or mom's skirt, screaming, and the teacher's trying to get the kid to go, So what in those kind of situations, I have suggested to parents any number of things, including maybe somebody else could take the kid to school. And just, if you insist on taking your kid to school, you have to reassure them that you're coming back. That's such an important thing for little kids to know, that their parents are going to be coming back. Okay. Kids who have a social phobia. Okay. And this is already, again, kids who are a little bit older, but kids who don't want to go on a sleepover, kids who don't want to go to a birthday party, kids who don't want to hang around with other kids. Now, the truth is that this has been an increasing problem, especially since Corona, simply because so much of the social interactions with other kids when everybody was locked down was on a screen. And you would be amazed at the number of kids who don't want to get together with kids anymore. Oh, I'll just text, or I'll just FaceTime. And it's something that we didn't have to deal with. I'll tell you an interesting, a cute little story. When I went this last year, I went on a program called Israel Now, which is through the Federation. And this last year, the Federation had a clinician on every single bus in Israel, because these were all 8th grade kids. The last normal year that these children were in school was 5th grade. So they're now in 8th grade, and they missed 6th grade and 7th grade. And some of the kids were still on Zoom in 8th grade. Okay, so there's a whole piece of the social interactions that kids normally have, that the 4 of us who are on this call grew up with, that there's a piece of that missing for these kids. Okay, such an important thing. And as a therapist, I can tell you that, we do a lot of telehealth. Okay, telehealth with kids who have a computer in front of them is not easy, because between you and me, there isn't a kid out there who's staring at a screen and doesn't want to talk to me. They want to be playing Minecraft. That's what they want to be doing. Okay, or the Roblox, that's what they want to be doing. Okay, so lots of kids these days are missing some kind of social interaction, and that's something that we as caregivers need to talk to our children about. Okay, it's very hard to do, because the kids look at us and say, for the last 2 years, all you've wanted me to do is look at a screen. And now you're telling me you don't want me to look at a screen? So we have to learn how to help our children balance what's going on in this world, because it's really hard. Okay, and there are still, I know that there's anxiety with quite a number of kids, with going back to school, dealing with COVID. Okay, it's not gone. There are kids who are still wearing masks. At JCFS, our building is considered a health facility. So I still see my clients who come into the office with a mask on, and they need to wear a mask as well. Okay, so what does it mean for a child who maybe is in a family where there might be some kind of a medical reason where they have to wear a mask, and they have to go to school like that? Okay, so parents need to be able to help their children negotiate, what are you going to do when somebody says something to you in school? Okay, because we know, all of us on this call know, that sometimes kids can be cruel. Okay, and kids don't always say the nicest things to other kids. So social anxiety, we have seen, has gone up tremendously. Okay, only because kids have missed, like, 6th grade, 7th grade, where there is such a push for kids to be social. Okay, as we were talking about the bat mitzvahs before, that's when girls and boys begin to have these kind of relationships that have some kind of a meaning. And if they've been doing it on a screen, we've seen a tremendous amount of kids with social anxiety. So a question that I get asked sometimes as a clinician is, why is my kid anxious? Well, that's a $6 million question. And lots of times, especially for kids who are maybe moving into middle school, and even kids who are younger, which surprised me when I read the research, is that they subject themselves to a lot more scrutiny. Okay, kids just do that. Okay, and this gives rise to some anxiety. Okay, they worry. What do kids worry about? Kids are worrying about performing well in school. Kids are worrying about impressing their peers. Kids are worrying about living up to their parents' expectations. Okay. And I think all of us understand that, we all say to our kids, we just want you to do the best you can. I don't necessarily need a report card full of A's, but don't want a report card full of D's either. I want you to do the best you can. Okay. So if a child feels like they're failing in any one of these areas, they're failing, let's say, if they're not doing well in school, lots of kids are not going to come over and say, Mom, I'm really messing up in math. No, they don't come and tell you that. Okay. It usually ends up that when we see the report card, it's like, so can we talk about this C- in math here? Because I don't know what's going on. Okay. So kids are not necessarily going to do that. Okay. Um, you know, Plenty of parents that I have spoken to with anxious children feel that they don't want to hover over their kids. Okay. And I hear what they're saying. Okay. But we as parents have a responsibility to make sure that our kids are doing what they're supposed to be doing. In other words, there's nothing wrong with you as a parent saying, hi, so could I see what you have for homework tonight? And before they leave for school in the morning or before they go to sleep at night, say, could I see if it's done? Okay. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that because that's our job. Okay. And if we find that our child is not necessarily doing what they're supposed to be doing, this opens up a whole it opens up an arena for us to be able to talk to them like, okay, you've been up in your room for 3 hours and there's minimal work that you did. We're going to have to talk about it. Okay. Because between you and me, I would much rather hear about it from my kid than wait to get a phone call from the school. Okay. Which is probably going to happen. So the kids feel that they're failing in some way. Okay. And, they're embarrassed. We find it very difficult to believe sometimes that our kids can be embarrassed or that, we all know if any of you have teenagers, we as parents are embarrassing to them, but they'll never admit to us that they're feeling embarrassed about something. So I encourage parents to use that word, to be able to actually say, you seem embarrassed to tell me that you couldn't get your math done. What can I do to help? What can we do to help? What can, that kind of thing, because they're not going to come to us and they're just, I don't know, they're just not going to tell us this. Okay. Now, as I said before, kids pick up on what's going on in families. Okay. Which is why it's so important for teachers to know what's going on. Because if, let's say, parents are deciding that they need to separate, okay, or a parent loses a job, okay, if the kid's coming to school stressed out about it, teachers need to know about it. I'll give you an example. When I was at the job before I came to JCFS, the agency I had closed down, and I had a daughter who was in Israel that year. And she used to call me all the time from Israel at work. Okay. And we decided, wrongfully so, that why are we going to bother our daughter in Israel, telling her that I lost my job, that I'm busy looking for a new job? Why would we bother calling? No need to do that. Okay. We totally forgot about the fact that she used to call me at my office. So one day my daughter calls and says, hi, so I just called your number at the office to talk to you, and the number is disconnected. Is there something that you want to tell me? So in the meantime, till she finally got hold of us, because it's an 8-hour time difference, she's freaking out, like trying to figure out why she can't get hold of me at the office. Okay. Thinking about it now, it would have been great for me to call her and say, look, just want you to know I lost my job. But we don't always think, unfortunately, we as parents don't always think as clearly as we should. So sometimes it's just important, especially for older kids, to find out about it, to know about it. okay? An ill parent, an ill sibling, an ill grandparent. How do parents deal with death in a family? Okay, kids, little kids have no understanding about why this is happening. Okay, they go to school anxious about it. They especially for little kids who worry. Oh, wait a minute, grandma was here yesterday and she's not here today. Does that mean that mom and dad aren't going to be here when I come home tonight? Okay, and I've heard this. I've heard this from kids. This is not stuff that I'm just thinking about. I've heard kids say this, that they really get worried about that. So there needs to be, and it's, there are so many uncomfortable discussions that we sometimes have to have as to our kids, but thinking about somebody being sick if they are in the family, just to be able to let them know that this is what's going on, because the anxiety the kids feel without it, and you'd be amazed of what kids think. So it's really important for us as parents to be able to address these kind of things. Okay. So we as parents also need to provide opportunities to discuss these things with our kids. Okay. And everybody is busy. In this world today, there isn't a single parent in the world or any kind of a caregiver who's going to say, oh yeah, I got plenty of time. That just doesn't work, where everybody is just busy, busy, busy. We have to make sure that we as parents find a way to allow our children to have the opportunity to talk to us. Okay. And it is amazing, 10 minutes, 5 minutes of even just having a one-on-one with a kid. Okay, I remember going back many years ago. My wife and I have 6 children, and my daughter once had some friends over, and for dinner, she was in high school, and at dinner we would go around and say, tell me something nice about your day, and we always used to include them. And I remember after one really crazy meal, I said to my daughter, you know, your friends are never going to come back. I mean, they're done with coming to our house, because this was the craziest. And my daughter was like, are you kidding? They come home, parents leave a note, put something in the microwave for yourself. They're like, some of these young ladies had never experienced this kind of family thing where parents are actually saying, tell me something good about your day. Tell me something that wasn't so good about your day. Okay, so we have to give our kids the opportunity to be able to open up and discuss with us some of the things that we feel that's important for them to talk about. Now, kids get anxious. We know that. Okay, how do I tell if my kid is anxious? Okay, so just a couple of things to look for if you're noticing this about your child. So if things are beginning to interfere with family activities, so you're going on a picnic and he or she doesn't want to go, you want to play a board game, he or she doesn't want to play the board game, you're sitting around a campfire and she doesn't want to do that, or he doesn't want to do that. So when the anxiety begins to interfere with what's going on in the family, okay, you really have to stop and look at maybe it's time to really do something about this. And again, so many of the parents who I see is like, oh my God, you know, if I go to my pediatrician and I talk to my pediatrician about how my child is so anxious, they feel that it's something negative about them. And I keep on reminding parents that if you're noticing it, your pediatrician is going to be so thrilled that you notice this. Okay. I mean, I remember telling parents a couple of years ago who were so reluctant to put their child on an ADHD medication because they were feeling that it impacted how they would be viewed. And I said to them, if your child needed glasses, would you not take them to the optometrist? If your child was diabetic, would you not take them to get insulin? So your child needs an ADHD medication. And if you start taking care of it now, they might not need to be on it for so long. So I talk to a lot of parents, especially when their kids have some anxiety, to bring this to their pediatricians. Okay. Um, sleep is so important. Okay. Kids don't know that. We know that as adults, how important sleep is. Kids would rather sit with the blanket over their heads, with their phones underneath their blankets, or their tablets, or whatever piece of IT they have. This is what they want to do. That's where they want to be. Okay. And it doesn't make a difference if they're only going to get 2 hours of sleep. They don't really care. Okay. But if you're finding that your kid is not sleeping, okay, there are so many different ways to be able to do that. You can, you make a routine for them. Okay. Again, this goes back to us as parents saying, I'm noticing this about you. Okay. Let's see what we can do about it. Okay. So the other thing that I just wanted to talk about, I haven't even looked at the time. Okay, we only have another 10 minutes. Okay, so a couple of the other things that I just wanted to talk about is, excuse me. So there are some risk factors that parents might need to look at when they're noticing that their child might be a little anxious. Okay, so the first one, of course, is trauma. Okay, much of the research is showing that trauma, and many therapists these days are trauma therapists, because there are lots of things that can traumatize a kid. Okay, and there are so many, and anything can be, like, we as adults don't necessarily see them as trauma, but kids see them as trauma. Moving to a new house, okay, not necessarily traumatic. Okay, I remember a parent telling me they moved into a new house, and their little kid, who was busy crawling, kept bumping into the walls, and they couldn't figure out they were going to take the kid to the doctor because the kid kept bumping into the walls. And I said to them, no. I said, your child is used to crawling around your apartment, and there's a pattern on the floor, and that pattern is gone. He's learning new patterns. And they were like, oh, but there was so much anxiety coming from these parents. Okay, so trauma is so different for so many different people. Okay, stress buildup. Okay, and that can be work stress. That can be stress, sibling stress. Okay, I don't know how many of us on this call have siblings. Each and every single one of us has experienced sibling stress. Some of us who have siblings still have sibling stress. I speak from experience. What about personality? Okay, there are some kids who are just high strung, and it just is what it is. I have a grandchild who is tighter than a drum. Okay, and he's learning ways. He uses breathing, he uses counting. There are a couple of ways that his therapist is really helping him figure out how to do that, but he just has that kind of personality. And sometimes it's really important for us to realize that it really isn't stress that's happening. It's just some people are just high strung. Okay, and if that's their personality, okay, then you have to help your child figure out how to not. Okay, like I had a kid who used to get so anxious in the classroom. He used to just run out of the classroom and run in the hallways. Okay, so that wasn't very good for him, wasn't very good for the teacher, and wasn't very good for the social worker who ended up chasing him around the halls of the school. Okay, so they were able to sit down and figure out with him what was going on. They talked a little bit with him about what he was getting anxious about, and they helped him figure out ways that he could deal with his anxiety. Okay, he was able to raise his hand, teacher, and for this kid, it meant just putting your head down for a little while. Okay, and that was fine. If he raised his hand, the teacher knew that that's what he was going to do, and that he could do it. Okay, and the parents were using the same kind of techniques at home, and it really helped this kid. Okay, there's unfortunately, we as, teachers don't necessarily know about kids' histories, family histories. Anxiety can be passed down from one generation to another. Okay. Some of the complications that we as parents will notice and teachers will notice is that sometimes anxiety comes with depression. And part of the reason that that happens is because the adults in the children's lives are not helping them deal with their anxiety. We say, oh, it's going to be okay. Okay. And minimizing the anxiety for some of these kids only ratchets it up a little higher. So sometimes if kids get sad about it, sometimes they get to be depressed, and sometimes it's really just because nobody's paying attention to the fact that they have these kind of anxious feelings. There can be physical things that happen. Okay, kids with anxiety can have gastrointestinal problems, and that's something that we see. They can't function at school. If for teenagers, if they're at work, they can't do that. Sometimes kids get headaches because anxiety can cause headaches. Okay, and lots of kids who are young, okay, they don't know how to describe this to you. Okay, so kids who are sitting there like this, it's not just because they're sad. It might be because they have a real physical something going on in their head. So that's another complication. And the biggest one, like I mentioned before, was really dealing with social isolation. Kids who just don't want to have anything to do with other kids. Okay. So some ways to help our kids deal with anxiety and that is related to school. Teach kids that they can do some deep breathing while they're in class. Okay. Get them to talk about what they're feeling. Okay. Let's be open with our kids and open this dialogue. Take a break. Okay. Work with the teachers that they can take a break. Okay. There are a lot of kids who, when they come home from school, they can't sit down and start getting their homework done right away. And that's okay. It's okay to take a break. Okay. It's just a matter of sitting down and saying, okay, you need a break for half an hour. That's fine. So now it's 3:45. So by 4:15 or 4:30, we're going to sit down and get our homework done and start on our homework. Okay. So that way you're helping them structure their time, but you're also saying, I understand you had a tough day at school. Let's just give you a chance to talk a little bit, to talk it down a little bit and get some breaks. Okay. Getting kids up and moving. One of the best ways. And again, goes back to all these kids who are sitting at the computer all day. Take them for a walk. How many parents do you know who would say to their kids, you know what, let's go for a walk? Right. All the kids are going, really, I don't want to be seen with you. But, just take the kid around the block for half an hour or go for a bike ride. Do something that gets kids up and moving. Make sure that kids eat healthy. Okay, that's a big, big, big thing about anxiety. And we all know on this call, getting kids to eat healthy, not the easiest thing in the world. Okay, but we can talk to them about it. Okay, we don't want to take away all their fun stuff to do, but we can talk about the fact that they should be eating some vegetables and they should be eating some fruit. Okay, for older kids, start a gratitude journal. Oh, it's you'd be amazed. Most of the time when I ask kids to do this, I get this pushback. Oh, like in big time, I get a pushback. Okay, but what happens is once they get started, it's like the pages just flow, and getting them to read it back to themselves, best thing ever, because sometimes they forget what they write. It's sort of like when we do after this, there's been an incident like what happened in Highland Park. When we do these groups, we have somebody called a scribe who writes down what people say, and then we read it back to them. It is so powerful. So if you have a child who's keeping a journal, encourage them to read the journal again. And I'm going to now just ask if there are any questions or any concerns or anything anybody would like to say, because I've been talking for, yes.
I'm wondering that, so I mean, I think